Namaskaram. As Marty said, today I'm going to be talking about Nāṉ Ār, who am I? Last time I talked up to paragraph 5, so this time I'm going to talk from paragraph 6. So I will be, the earlier paragraphs I skimmed through a bit, but this I'm going to discuss in a bit more detail, because this is a paragraph that deals in detail with the practice of self-investigation. So I'll be going through it sentence by sentence. And if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask at any point, please don't hesitate. Just you need not wait till I've finished. You can start asking questions at any point. In the first sentence of this paragraph, Bhagavan says, "Only by the investigation, who am I, will the mind cease or subside or disappear forever." So in this sentence, Bhagavan, in order to emphasize only by the investigation, he puts a double emphasis on the term vichara, which means by investigation. He puts a double emphasis on that by saying vichara. That's a very strong way of saying only by this, only by the investigation, who am I, will the mind cease or subside. Here, obviously, the term that he uses for cease, well, it's a term that can be used, a verb that can be used in different senses, in different contexts. But in this context, he's not just talking about temporary subsidence of mind, because obviously the mind subsides temporarily every day in sleep just because we're tired. But so what he's referring to here is the permanent subsidence of mind. In other words, the manonasa, the destruction of mind, that can be brought about only by this investigation, who am I? We can explain this there are two ways in which we can explain this. The first is that the mind here in this context, in most of this particular text, Nāṉ Ār, Bhagavan is using mind as a synonym for ego. That is, in some context, mind is a general term referring to all thoughts, but of all thoughts, the first thought is the thought called I, as he said in the previous paragraph. That thought called I is ego. Why it is the first thought is that all other thoughts are objects, and the first thought, I, is the subject. So the objects exist only in the view of the subject. So without the subject, there can be no objects. So what Bhagavan refers to here as manam, he's referring to ego, which is the root and essence of the mind. So as Bhagavan often explained, ego is nothing but a mistaken awareness of ourselves, a false awareness of ourselves. That is, when we rise as ego, instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body. So in other words, it's the pure awareness I am mixed with adjuncts, this body, a name and a form. So this body, this person that we seem to be is not what we actually are, because we seem to be this person only in the waking state. In dream, we experience some other body as ourselves. In sleep, we don't experience any body as ourselves. So this awareness of ourselves, I am this body, I am this person, is a false awareness. It's an erroneous awareness. So since it's an erroneous awareness, it can be removed only by correct awareness. In other words, the mind will be eradicated, or ego will be eradicated only by means of pure self-awareness, awareness of ourselves as we actually are. And in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves. If you want to know anything, you have to pay attention to it. If you don't pay attention to it, we can't gain knowledge about anything without using our power of attention. So the power of attention is the basic tool we have for learning or knowing anything. So in order to know what we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves. And what Bhagavan calls the investigation, who am I, it means only that. It means self-attentiveness, being attending only to ourselves. So the mind will be destroyed only by this investigation, because only by investigating or attending to ourselves can we know ourselves as we actually are. And only when we know ourselves as we actually are will mind or ego be eradicated. That's one way of explaining it. The other way of explaining it is Bhagavan has revealed something that, as far as I'm aware, has never been revealed so clearly before Bhagavan in any of the ancient texts. That is, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending when it attends to itself alone. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we are thereby nourishing and sustaining ego. But merely withdrawing our attention from all other things doesn't bring about the destruction of ego, because every day in sleep, when we fall asleep because we're too tired to continue attending to things other than ourselves. So we withdraw our attention from all other things. And so the mind subsides in sleep, which is a state of temporary dissolution of mind, manolaya. That is not our aim, because when the mind subsides in manolaya, it will again rise sooner or later. So there's no benefit in being in a state of manolaya. So our aim is to bring about the permanent cessation of mind. In other words, the permanent dissolution of mind. That permanent dissolution of mind can be brought about only by self-investigation. That is, only when ego attends to itself will it subside in such a way that it never rises again. So this is what Bhagavan implies in this first sentence. This is a very central teaching of, it's a very core, it's one of the core principles of Bhagavan's teachings, but it's only by self-investigation that the mind will subside. Even surrender, Bhagavan made clear, can be brought about, that is, the complete surrender of mind or ego can be brought about only by self-investigation. Then in the next sentence, about the literal meaning of the next sentence is, the thought, who am I, destroying all other thoughts, will itself also in the end be destroyed like a corpse burning stick. What he means here by the thought, who am I, is he's using the term thought here metaphorically. That is, the thought, who am I, is what he referred to in the previous sentence as the investigation, who am I. Why he refers to it metaphorically as a thought is the attention we pay to anything other than ourselves is a thought. So metaphorically, we can say attention we pay to ourselves is a thought. But it's not a thought in the same sense that other thoughts are thoughts. It's in this. It's only metaphorically that we can call it this self-attentiveness. We can call it a thought. And so about this. So what he means by the thought, who am I, is the attentiveness with which we investigate ourselves. In other words, the thought, who am I, means simply self-attentiveness. Destroying all other thoughts. That is, the more we cling to self-attentiveness, the more other thoughts will subside and lose their, and the vasanas that give rise to them will lose their strength, because thoughts can rise and flourish only when we attend to them, because they don't exist except in our awareness. So no thought can survive if we don't attend to it. So the more we attend to ourselves and thereby deny attention to any other thought, the thoughts will get destroyed. So he says, a thought who am I, destroying all other thoughts, will in the end, will itself also in the end be destroyed. That is, when we are investigating ourselves, we are trying to attend to ourselves. Self-attentiveness is possible only in the waking and dream states. In sleep, we cannot be self-attentive because attention is a function of the mind or ego. Attention means attention is a selective use of our awareness, a selective focusing of our awareness on one thing or one set of things in preference to other things. So only for the mind is there such a thing as attention, because it's only for the mind or ego that there's multiplicity. In a state of perfect oneness, as in sleep, there's no question of attention, because there's nothing other than ourselves for us to be aware of. So it's only in the waking and dream states that there is such a thing as attention. In other words, as I say, it's a function of the mind. So self-attentiveness is the means by which we know ourselves as we actually are. But when by means of self-attentiveness, ego is dissolved in its source, along with ego, its attentiveness will also its power of attention will also come to an end, because in the absence of ego, there is no multiplicity, and then there's no such thing as a power of attention, because when there's only one, there's no option to be selectively aware of that one. So that's why in the end, even this self-attentiveness will be destroyed. That is, the self-attentiveness will merge back into the pure self-awareness that we actually are. That's what he means here by saying it will be destroyed. And then he gives an analogy. He says, like a corpse burning stick. A corpse burning stick is what he's referring to here is, in India, generally, Hindus cremate bodies, and cremate when the person passes away. They're cremated, and they're cremated not like in modern crematoriums. It's on an open pyre. They pile up firewood and dried cow dung to make a raised platform. The body is placed on that platform, and the fire is lit, and a stick is used to make sure that for instance, if any burning ember falls off the pyre, it's put back on the pyre with a stick. And so a stick is used in order to ensure that the corpse is burnt thoroughly. So that's what Bhagavan is referring to here as a corpse burning stick. It's the stick that is used to ensure that the fire continues burning until the corpse is thoroughly reduced to ashes. So when such a stick, when it's being used to keep the fire burning, it itself begins to burn, and eventually, by the time the fire by the time the corpse has been thoroughly burned and reduced to ashes, the fire is almost extinguished. And then the corpse burning stick is just thrown it's almost already burned, and it's just thrown into the fire, and it burns along with the rest of the fire. So just like that, the thought, who am I, it will destroy all other thoughts, and having destroyed all other thoughts, it will itself be destroyed. That is what Bhagavan says in this sentence. Then in the third sentence, he begins to talk about what is this, what he referred to in the previous two sentences as the investigation, who am I, and the thought, who am I. What actually is this practice? What he says in this third sentence is, if other thoughts rise, without trying to complete them, it is necessary to investigate to whom they have occurred. This is one of the very valuable clues that Bhagavan often gave. That is, the nature of of the mind or ego is to be always attending to things other than itself. So the natural flow of the mind, the natural flow of the attention is outwards, away from ourselves towards other things. But so particularly when we start on this practice of self-investigation, people often have difficulty in understanding how to attend to myself, how to be self-attentive, because we ourselves are not an object. All the other things that we attend to are objects. So we understand what it means to attend to objects, but how to attend to the subject. The subject is not an object. It's not a form. It's got no it's got no distinguishing characteristics like objects have. So how to attend to myself? So this is why Bhagavan often gave this clue. That is, whatever we may be aware of, whatever thought or phenomenon may appear, to whom does it appear? It appears to me. So this Bhagavan didn't ask us to question to whom, but he gave this question as a pointer. That is, how to turn our attention back to ourselves. Whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? It appears only to me. So we turn our attention. It's a very powerful pointer, very powerful clue to how we can turn our attention back to ourselves. And when he says, if other thoughts rise, Bhagavan isn't here. Some people take thoughts to mean the verbal thoughts or the mental chatter that's generally going on in the mind most of the waking and dream state. Bhagavan uses the term thought in a much broader and deeper sense than this. According to Bhagavan, all phenomena are just thoughts. Even he said in the fourth paragraph that the world is nothing but thoughts. If you remove all thoughts, there's no such thing as the world. That excluding thoughts, there's no such thing as the world. So all mental phenomena are thoughts. So all perceptions, memories, feelings, whatever everything, it's all thoughts. So according to Bhagavan, everything other than the pure awareness I am is a thought. And not only are all objects, all phenomena thoughts, even the subject, the ego, is itself a thought. That's why Bhagavan often referred to ego as the thought called I. So when he says if other thoughts rise, he means if anything appears, without allowing our attention to go out towards it, we should turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. That's what, when he says without trying to complete them, if other thoughts rise without trying to complete them, he means without allowing our attention to follow any train of thoughts or to go after anything, any object, any phenomenon. So that is when thoughts or feelings or memories or perceptions appear, the natural tendency of the mind is to allow the attention to go out towards those things. But Bhagavan says, without allowing our attention to go away from ourselves, we should turn it back to ourselves, the one to whom these have occurred. And then in the next sentence, he says, however many thoughts rise, what? Here, what implies what's it matter, or so what? So what Bhagavan is implying here, however many thoughts rise, it doesn't matter. That is, we shouldn't be concerned about thoughts, because whenever any thought arises, if we turn our attention back to ourselves, it doesn't matter however many thoughts arise, because the thoughts can flourish only when we attend to them. If we're constantly turning our attention back to ourselves and trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness, the thoughts will be deprived of our attention, and therefore they'll lose their strength. That's why Bhagavan says, because there's another reason why Bhagavan said this, that is, in many forms of meditation, the aim is to be without thoughts, which generally people understand to mean to be without mental chatter, or some people who've got a deeper understanding mean to without attention to anything other than ourselves. But really, really trying to get rid of thoughts or to avoid attending to other things isn't the solution. The solution is to attend only to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, automatically the thoughts will be the thoughts will recede into the background. But the more we attend to ourselves, the less thoughts will loom large in our attention. That is, the more we attend to ourselves, the more they will recede into the background of our awareness. So our aim isn't to get rid of thoughts. Our aim is to attend only to ourselves, to think only of ourselves. That is, to be self-attentive. So we shouldn't concern ourselves about thoughts. Some people say, "Oh, I try to meditate, but I'm not able to get rid of thoughts." That is not our aim, getting rid of thoughts. That's why Bhagavan says here, however many thoughts rise, so what? But this connects on to the next sentence, which is a very important sentence. What he says in the next sentence is, vigilantly, as soon as each thought appears, if one investigates to whom it has appeared, it will be clear to me. So whatever thoughts or phenomena appear, to whom do they appear? They appear only to me. So what Bhagavan implies here, as I said earlier with the sentence before the previous one, what Bhagavan means by this clue is, whenever we find our attention has been diverted away from ourselves towards anything else, that other thing has thereby appeared in our awareness. So we should turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. Because all thoughts appear, all thoughts, all phenomena, they appear only to ourselves, only to ego. So if instead of allowing our attention to go towards whatever appears, we turn it back to attend to ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared, the thought will thereby recede into the background. And then in the next sentence, Bhagavan says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. Some people who, that is an important point to remember here, to note here. Bhagavan isn't saying to ask to whom, or to ask who am I. Sometimes this has been wrongly translated as if Bhagavan said ask. But Bhagavan doesn't say ask. The verb he uses is vichari. Vichari is the verb form of vichara, so it means investigate. So he says, if we investigate to whom, it will be clear to me. And then he says in the next sentence, if one investigates who am I. Some people who take this to be a process of questioning, they think they have to wait for the next thought to arise and then to ask, oh, to whom is this thought? To me. Who am I? As if it's a process of questioning. That is not what Bhagavan means. That is what he means when he talks about investigating to whom. That is, when our attention goes away from ourselves, we have to investigate to whom and to turn it back to ourselves. So investigating to whom means turning our attention away from other things back towards ourselves. And investigating who am I means holding on to the self-attentiveness. That is, whenever our attention goes away from ourselves, we have to turn it back to ourselves. But we then have to try to hold firmly to that self-attentiveness so that it doesn't slip away again. If it slips away again, it slips away towards other things. Those other things appear in our awareness. As soon as they appear in our awareness, they should remind us, oh, to whom has this appeared? And we turn our attention back to ourselves and we continue trying to hold on to the self-attentiveness. So that's the significance of these two questions. As I say, it's not a question that we should ask, but these questions are pointers. So what the question to whom is pointing at is that when our attention is diverted away towards other things, we should turn it back to ourselves, the one who is aware of those other things, the one to whom those other things have appeared. And the question, who am I, indicates that we should hold firmly onto that I and not let go of it. If we don't let go of it, there'll be no scope for other thoughts to arise. So he says, if one investigates who am I, that implies by vigilantly attending to ourselves and thereby not letting go of ourselves, the mind will return to its birthplace. What he means by its birthplace is the source from which it rose. The source from which it rose is only ourself. That is, what we actually are is pure awareness. From this pure awareness, a false awareness, an adjunct mixed awareness, I am this body, rises. That adjunct mixed awareness is ego. So the source of ego, the birthplace of ego, is only ourself, the pure awareness I am. If we hold on to self-attentiveness, the mind will subside back into its source. It's what Bhagavan means when he says the mind will return to its birthplace. Then in the next sentence, he says, the thought that had risen will also cease. That is, if we cling firmly to, if a thought has arisen, has appeared, and we turn our attention back to ourselves and hold on to self-attentiveness, the thought will thereby cease. Why? Because the thoughts can stand and flourish only when we attend to them. If we refrain from attending to thoughts, they will automatically cease. That is the implication of that sentence. And then the next sentence, Bhagavan says, when one practices and practices in this manner, for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. This is a very important sentence. That is what Bhagavan is indicating here. But patient and persistent practice is necessary. That's why he repeats the word practice. Paraka is the infinitive of to practice, or a verb meaning to practice. Often in Tamil, the infinitive is used in the sense of a conditional, meaning when. So when one practices is paraka. Paraka means when one practices and practices. When we persevere, persist in practicing like this, that is, whenever any other thought appears, turning our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared, then trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness. And if it again, the attention again slips away, again bring it back.
Question, Michael.
Sorry?
Question about that?
Yes, certainly. Yes.
About the process of practice, which you've talked about several times, but my question is about the actual practice itself. Yes. In other words, as you say, investigation means to turn our attention back to oneself whenever it drifts to thought.
Yes.
Understand it?
Yes.
Do it. But it seems to me I always have a choice. I'm never quite sure which one I should lean to the most. Who am I follows answering the question in whom the thoughts occur. Well, I answer who am I, as Ramana suggests, in one of two ways. By turning to the answer itself, I am that I am, I, or I turn to quiescence, to silence. That path seems a little forced for me. It doesn't seem to come as naturally as turning to the answers to the question, who am I?
No. Neither is what Bhagavan has recommended. That is what Bhagavan means by investigating who am I, is simply being self-attentive. If we cling firmly to self-attentiveness, the mind will subside and quiescence will result. But quiescence alone is not our aim, because the mind is quiescent in sleep.
So maybe I'm asking a process question about self-attention. Now, yes. I'm a very literal person, so I can think of that as just repeating mentally, I am that I am, to be self-attentive, or I can hope that there's a deeper, varied answer that might occur to take me deeper into my own self-investigation.
In the previous paragraph, in paragraph 5, Bhagavan says that even if he gives a very useful clue for beginners, even if one goes on thinking, I, it will lead to that place. In other words, it will lead to self-attentiveness. The reason for that is all words refer to something, and when any word is when we hear any word, it brings something to our mind. If a noun is brought to our mind, if a noun is said, for example, tree or car or boat, it brings a certain object to our mind. If a verb is mentioned, it also brings something to our mind, running. It brings a certain action to our mind. So all words have when we hear a word, our mind tends to go towards what that word is denoting. So any word that we hear, it brings a certain image to our mind of the thing that is referred to.
I do that every day, but it seems almost too simple. We used to call the times tables in the third grade.
It's a useful starting point, but Bhagavan never recommended that we should go on forever saying I. It's useful in the early stages to help one become familiar with self-attentiveness. So when we repeat I, we shouldn't repeat it like a mantra, I, because it becomes mechanical. We should repeat it very slowly and contemplatively. That is, when we say the word I, what is that awareness that is denoted by this word I? So, because our aim is to be self-attentive, and there's a not saying I by mouth. In other words, not repeating the word I, investigating with an inward sinking mind where one rises as I, alone is the path of knowledge. So this is just repeating the word I is just a clue to help us get started. But it's not we have to go beyond merely repeating the word, because our aim is to sink deep within. And when we sink deep, even the word I is something other than ourselves. How it's helpful is that it points us back, it points our attention back to ourselves. So if we want to go deep in this investigation, we have to drop the word I and cling firmly to that which is denoted by that word I. So as to, you said about answers, I am I. Yes, well, Bhagavan never gave that as an answer. But what Bhagavan said, in the context in which Bhagavan used the term I am I, in verse 30 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, verse 20 of Upadēśa Undiyār, and also in Āṉma-Viddai, the Song on the Science of Self, Bhagavan said, what the basic meaning of that is, when ego or mind dies, but there will be a clarity of awareness that shines forth as I am I. Why he used this term I am I, he explained. That is, ego, I am this or I am that, is ego. That is, identifying ourselves with any object or anything other than ourselves is ego. Our true identity is only I. So the clarity of self-awareness that shines forth when ego dies is, I am only I, I'm nothing but I. Bhagavan didn't suggest that we repeat this as a formula. I mean, it may be helpful to bring our attention back to ourselves, but our aim is to go deep in this investigation. So our aim is not to give any answer. The answer to the question, who am I, is the eradication of ego. And when ego is eradicated, what then remains, that is what we actually are. So we are not, that's why I said it's not actually asking a question. It's investigating to find out what we actually are. So we are not looking for any answer in words. We are looking for that clarity of pure awareness, which is our real nature. Does that help to answer
Yeah, it does very much, but maybe people have varying degrees of what Sai Baba calls the monkey mind. Mine is very high level monkey mind.
Join the club.
So
I think all of us will agree. We all have monkey mind. I mean, the mind is a monkey. It's the nature of the mind.
Again, it's the process question. It all makes sense intellectually, but if we want to go deep, we need to drop the word I after, let's say, a beginning stage of that usage. But when I drop the repetition of the word I, or I am that, I tend to drift back into thought. It's an involuntary process. Yeah. And as much as I would like to investigate at a deeper level, I get stymied because I'm away from reminding myself of my true identity. And I go into the void of more thoughts waiting to join in.
Yeah. This is the nature of the mind. It's not what you experience is what we all experience. It is the nature of the mind to go outwards towards things. But as Bhagavan said, what does it matter? However many thoughts arise, whenever any thought arises, if we vigilantly investigate to whom it has arisen, our attention will turn back to ourselves. And if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, that thought will thereby subside. The next moment, again, another thought, where again our attention will go away from ourselves. We again bring it back. That is, this is a process, as you say. It's a process. We are trying to wean the mind off its inclination to go towards other things. The inclinations of the mind to go towards anything other than itself is what Bhagavan calls Vishaya Vasana. Vishaya means any object or phenomena. Vasana means inclination. So our inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves is a Vishaya Vasana. So long as it is the nature of ego to have Vishaya Vasanas. So long as ego survives, the Vishaya Vasanas will be there. We'll be constantly feeling that inclination to attend to other things. But the more at every moment, our natural inclination is to attend to things other than ourselves. Our aim is, if we're following Bhagavan's path, is to attend only to ourselves. So we are trying to cultivate the inclination to attend to ourselves, which is what is called satvasana, the inclination just to be, and thereby to weaken the inclination to attend to anything else. We all constantly fail in this, but failure is part of the process. That is, there's a saying, the road to success is paved with failure. That's obviously normally said in a worldly sense. If you want to be successful in a worldly sense, you have to be ready to fail many times, whatever be your undertaking. But it's also true in the spiritual path. Because of the strong inclination we have to go outwards, we will constantly be failing to hold on to self-attentiveness. But it doesn't matter, as Bhagavan says, however many thoughts arise, so what? Bhagavan said, big deal. All we need to do, when the mind gets diverted away from ourselves, it gets diverted towards something else that has appeared in our awareness. So to whom has it appeared? To me. We turn our attention back to ourselves. This process has to go on repeatedly. This is what Bhagavan means by, if one practices in this manner, the mind will gain the strength to abide in its birthplace. So we shouldn't be disheartened by failure. Failure is good, because if we, the fact that we're failing shows that we're trying. If we weren't even trying, we wouldn't be failing. So that's why sometimes when Bhagavan was asked, are there any signs of progress in this path? Bhagavan said the only sign of progress is perseverance. It doesn't matter whether you're succeeding or not. So long as you're persevering, that is progress. Because every time we, instead of allowing ourselves to be swayed by a vasana, a Vishaya vasana, we cling to self-attentiveness, we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas and strengthening the Sat vasana. We may not be able to perceive this. It may seem after 40, 50 years that we are no better at this than when we started. It doesn't matter. So long as we're persevering, we are making progress. And this will continue till the very end, till the time when ego is eradicated. The struggle will continue. It's inevitable, because that's why Bhagavan says later in the 11th paragraph, so long as there are Vishaya vasanas in the mind, so long the investigation, who am I, is necessary. So when will Vishaya vasanas cease? Only when ego ceases, because it's the very nature of ego to have Vishaya vasanas. So long as the root is there, it will continue sprouting. The ego is the root, the Vishaya vasanas are the sprouts.
Thank you. I get it much more clearly now.
Right.
I suffered from an inferiority complex because I was a lousy student at all school and college. Now that I'm a better student, I put a lot of meaning to that word investigation, self-investigation.
It is.
I know the netties, I know what I'm not, and I repeat those things, and I repeat what I am, and I go into silence, but that feels inadequate. It is
inadequate. It is inadequate. Some people say, oh, I meditated for 20 minutes and I was without thoughts for 20 minutes. They obviously weren't practicing self-investigation. They lulled their mind into a state where the mental chatter was subdued, and they enjoy a sort of quiescence. But that quiescence is something that appears and disappears. So according to Bhagavan, that quiescence is itself a thought. Whatever appears and disappears is a thought. So if we're really following self-investigation, we won't feel, oh, for 20 minutes I was without thoughts. We will feel, for 20 minutes I was struggling. The vasanas were drawing my attention away from myself, and I was kept on trying to bring it back to myself.
That's great. Thank you.
It does seem like it's a all or none phenomena to some extent.
Yes, either way. Well, not really, because that is the normal condition of the mind, is to be attending to other things. Our aim is to turn our attention away from other things back towards ourselves. So it is, metaphorically speaking, we can say our aim is to turn 180 degrees away from other things towards ourselves. When we are practicing self-attentiveness, because we still have strong inclination to attend to other things, we are not able to turn the full 180 degrees. So we may be turning 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 50 degrees, 90 degrees, 120 degrees, 170 degrees. So there are so many degrees of intensity of self-attentiveness. So the more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more number of degrees we are turning. Now, of course, we're not to measure this, we can't measure it, but the more we attend to ourselves, the more our attention will be withdrawn from other things. So none of us achieve perfect self-attentiveness. If we find out if we experience perfect self-attentiveness for just a split second, that is the end of the story. That is, if we turn the full 180 degrees, we will be aware only of ourselves and not of anything else whatsoever. And when we're aware only of ourselves, that is the state of pure awareness. And when ego experiences that state of pure awareness, when it experiences itself as pure awareness, it will thereby be destroyed. Because ego is the mixed awareness, I am its body. When ego experiences itself as the pure awareness I am, without any adjuncts, without any awareness of anything other than itself, it is thereby eradicated. So we need to turn 180 degrees only for a split second. So all our practice now, we are trying to achieve that 180-degree turn. When it's going to happen, we don't know. It may seem that we're a very long way from it, and it may happen the next moment. Or we may think, oh, I'm very good at this self-investigation. I'm making rapid progress. So I'm going to, if we got that, if that eye rises like that, we've got a long time to wait. Because
it's also possible that you turn 180 and then you're back to maybe 45.
No, you turn 180,
you're done.
When you turn 180, ego is eradicated so thoroughly that you will clearly know there was never any such thing as ego, because what we actually are, we are always that. So though we metaphorically talk about mano-nasa, destruction of the mind or eradication of ego, that is only from the perspective of ego that we are talking like that. Actually, the final experience, as Bhagavan says in verse 17 of Upadēśa Undiyār, Manati Nuruve Maravachava Manamenam Ondrile Undipara. In Sanskrit, it's Manasam tu kim Margane Krite Neva Manasam Margamajavat. So when we investigate this, the mind, that means ego, when we investigate it without forgetfulness, that is, without allowing our attention to drift away towards other things, it will be clear that there's no such thing as mind at all. So the destruction of ego means the clear recognition that there's no such thing at all. Because when will we recognize that there's no ego? Only when we recognize that we are always just pure awareness and nothing other than pure awareness. And pure awareness is immutable, so it never undergoes any change.
So at that stage, that means even the desire to reach that 180 would be lost, right?
Not only the desire will be lost, the one who has the desire will be lost. Who has a desire for moksha, for liberation or annihilation of ego? Who has that desire? It's only ego. When ego
that occurs simultaneously, you would say, or
yes, simultaneous. That is, when ego dies, all its desires will die along with it. In Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, I think in verse 29, Bhagavan says. So I'll continue from where I left off. That is, as I said, Bhagavan says in this sentence, when one practices and practices in this manner, it literally means for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. What that means is the mind's strength, power to stand. To remain firmly established in self-attentiveness will increase. He says in its birthplace that how do we stand established in our birthplace, in our source? Only by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness. So that is, though we may not be able to perceive the progress that we're making, by persevering in this practice, we are gradually gaining the strength to hold firmly to self-attentiveness and thereby not allow ourselves to be swayed by Vishaya vasanas. It's a very gradual process, and it's a process that we cannot easily perceive, because the more we are able to cling to self-attentiveness, the more clearly we'll be aware of every slip. Of every time our attention slips away from ourselves towards other things, we'll be clearly aware of that. Because of the strength of our ability to hold on to self-attentiveness, we'll be aware of even the slightest slip. So it will seem to us that we are still slipping as much as we were ever slipping. Because when the mind is less pure, when the mind is less has gone into this practice less deeply, it won't be so clearly aware of every small slip. We sit down to attend to ourselves, And 5 minutes later, we suddenly find, oh, I've been thinking of other things. We bring our attention back. So, but as the mind as we become more and more skilled in this practice, we'll be able to catch the mind when we'll be able to catch ourselves when our attention slips away from ourselves more quickly and bring it back again. So we're aware of our failure. The more clearly we're aware of our failure, the more we are making progress. But we obviously we can't. It's not something that we can measure. All we know is, if, as Bhagavan assures us here, if we persevere in this practice, if we go on practicing, in spite of any number of failures, doesn't matter, so long as we persevere, we will be gradually, imperceptibly gaining that power to hold on to that self-attentiveness, to stand firmly established in our birthplace.
Can I ask Michael about the maintaining and abiding in this self-awareness?
Yes.
Is this at this point more of a heart thought, more of a concentration in Patanjali's yoga, for example?
It's
at this stage.
It's not really. I think thinking of it in terms of concentration is, in a sense, yes, it is concentration, but we can concentrate on object for a prolonged period of time, because by attending to any object, we are thereby nourishing and sustaining ego. So ego isn't threatened. But when we try to attend to ourselves, the very existence of ego, our existence as a separate entity, is threatened. So the natural inclination of ego is to be swayed by its Vishaya vasanas and to go out. So in practice, we cannot hold on to self-attentiveness for a prolonged period of time. Or if we do hold on to it for a prolonged period of time, it's relatively superficial. We may be able to turn 10 degrees and hold on to it, or 20 degrees and hold on to it. But if you try and turn 170 degrees, very quickly your mind will bounce out again. So the deeper we go, the stronger the inclination to bounce out again. So it's different. I don't think it's useful to compare this practice to the practices of yoga, which are practicing attending to objects, something other than ourselves.
Thank you.
And regarding, you mentioned abidings. People often ask what's the difference between self-abidance and self-investigation or self-attentiveness. They are one and the same. That is, the more we attend to ourselves, attending to anything other than ourselves is a mental activity, because our attention is going away from ourselves towards something else. But when we attend to ourselves, our attention is not going anywhere. It's just remaining in its source. So self-attentiveness is a state of not of doing, but of just being. That being aspect of it is what is called abidance. Because according to Bhagavan, and Advaita generally, but Bhagavan very much emphasized this, being and awareness are one and the same thing. So to the extent that we attend to ourselves, we are thereby being ourselves, being as we actually are, that means. And to the extent that we attend to other things, we are rising as ego.
Thank you, yes.
So the more we attend to ourselves, the more ego subsides into the state of just being.
Michael.
Yes.
Oh, hi, Michael.
Yes.
Could you talk a little about self-attentiveness when the body is doing something like driving, or busy at work, or
Okay.
listening to one's boss, blah blah blah.
Right.
Dinner.
I'll start with a simple example. because it's the safest example. Being self-attentive while walking. Normally, when we're walking, we'll be thinking so many thoughts about other things. Instead of those other things are not immediately, they have no relevance to where we're walking or what we're doing. We usually don't see where, we usually don't pay much attention to the path we're walking on or where we're going. Of course, we pay enough attention to avoid bumping into people or bumping into trees or whatever, but it's very minimal attention. Most of the time, our mind will be on other things. Likewise, when driving, if you drive, so supposing you go to work every day and you have to drive 5 miles to go to work, you'll be so familiar with that route, you will hardly pay any attention to it. And when you get to your destination, if you try to remember, did I stop? Were the lights red there at that crossing, or was it green? You can't remember because you're so very minimal attention is required to drive once you're familiar with the route and everything. So what will you be doing while driving? You'll be thinking about problems at work or problems at home or paying the bills or this or that or when the next holiday is going to be. The mind is constantly, or what meal am I going to cook today, or which friends am I going to meet this weekend? Our mind is constantly thinking about things which are not of immediate, there's no immediate need to think of these things. Even when we're doing work that seems to require our attention, like we're in office, we may be answering correspondence or whatever our work may be, it may seem to require attention, but if you observe carefully, there'll be so many other thoughts will be going through your mind, but are not immediately relevant to what you're doing. So of the thoughts we have, to put it simply, of the thoughts we have during the course of a day, probably 99% of them are unnecessary thoughts. They're not of immediate need. There's no immediate need to think those thoughts. We are thinking the thoughts because it is the nature of the mind to be thinking about things other than itself. The mind keeps itself occupied, attending to other things. So instead of attending to any of those unnecessary thoughts, if you attend to yourself, you'll cut down your thoughts by 99%. Even deeper than that, the truth is nothing requires our attention. Whatever is to happen, according to Bhagavan, whatever is to happen is going to happen. Whatever is not going to happen is not going to happen. All that is to happen to us, all that we are to experience in our life is predetermined. So, and in order for us to experience whatever is predetermined, certain actions of our mind, speech, and body are necessary. For example, supposing it's our destiny to have a certain job, to work as a doctor or an engineer or a clerk or something. We have some job. If it's our destiny to do that, to earn by that means, our body, speech, and mind will be made to do those things. We need not attend to it. We could be attending to ourselves. If we were able to, we could be attending to ourselves 100%, and actions that the body, speech, and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do. It's no concern of ours. So actually, nothing requires our attention. If we were attending only to ourselves, everything would go on automatically as it's destined to go on. But this is hypothetical because in practice, the nature of the mind is to be swayed by its Vishaya vasanas. As I said, even when we got nothing else to think about, when we seem to be free of any need to think about anything other than ourselves, even then, if we sit down with eyes closed, or we lie down, or we sit in a comfortable chair, whatever it may be, if we want to attend only to ourselves, we've got no other preoccupation for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, only a tiny fraction of that time we'll actually spend attending to ourselves, because we try to hold on to that self-attentiveness, and a moment later, we allow ourselves to be swayed by a Vishaya-vasana. We have to bring it back again. So it's a constant, self-investigation is a constant struggle. So we will be constantly failing in our attempt to hold on firmly to self-attentiveness. But it doesn't matter. However many times we fail, we continue trying. That's all that's required. Bhagavan hasn't asked us to succeed. He's asked us to try. If we try, success is assured eventually. The more we try, the quicker the success will come. So our only concern should not be about, oh, when am I going to get moksha? When is all this going to come to an end? We should be focusing this. I can attend to myself only at one moment. Only at this present moment I can attend to myself. So let me attend to myself now. Let's not think about, oh, I must attend to myself after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes. Or I must, when I get home tonight, I must set aside 5 minutes for practicing self-attentiveness. That's never going to happen. We can only attend to ourselves here and now. So at each and every moment, we should be trying to attend to ourselves. If we're trying that, that is sufficient.
Michael, it sounds like you made a self-contradictory thought. I know you didn't, but that's how.
Okay.
Do the business of self-inquiry, self-investigation. That'll speed you along the path to having
Yes.
fewer thoughts. Speed you along the path to having a yogic sense of no thoughts, and you'll be focused on self rather than focused on the outside world. But then you said, and this is kind of a red button term for a lot of people, sometimes including myself, our teacher of many years says the same thing. You say, all that's going to happen in our lives are predetermined. Everything is predetermined. We have zero free will. But aren't we?
I didn't say that.
Well, that's what you meant. Okay.
Right.
That's where my conflict was.
Okay. This is Bhagavan has said everything is predetermined. So many people jump to this conclusion. Oh, Bhagavan has said there's no free will. Bhagavan hasn't said there's no free will. We need to understand the law of karma as taught in Advaita, as taught generally in Vedanta. That is, it is said there are 3 karmas. They're not actually, karma means action. So actually there's only one action. The other 2 karmas are the fruits of actions. The actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas are called agamya. Those actions are the actions, the vasanas are our will. So if we allow ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas and to act accordingly, those actions are called agamya. Agamya is the actions that we do using our free will. We do agamya. Those agamya is what creates fruit. Those fruit are not experienced in this life. They are stored in what is called sanchita. Sanchita is a Sanskrit word that simply means a heap or a pile. So it's the storehouse of all the fruits of our past actions that haven't yet borne fruit. From that sanchita, God or Guru selects for each lifetime which fruit we should experience. Generally, because our desires, we desire to experience much more than we can experience. So in each lifetime, we tend to accumulate much more fruit than we are consuming. So the sanchita is an ever-growing pile. So there's God or Guru has a very, very wide choice. So from that huge pile, he selects what fruit will be most conducive to our spiritual development. Those are what we experience in this lifetime as prarabdha. Prarabdha is the third of that is agamya, sanchita, prarabdha. These are the 3 types of karma. Prarabdha means destiny or fate. That is, whatever we are to experience in this lifetime is predetermined. We have no freedom to experience anything that we are not destined to experience, or to avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. So what we are to experience is predetermined. But that doesn't mean that we don't have free will. What is predetermined is what we are to experience. The freedom of will is, though we are destined to experience something, that doesn't mean we want to experience it. So free will determines what we want to experience. Destiny determines what we are to experience. So there's no conflict at all between them. And as far as actions are concerned, the actions of our mind, speech, and body are being driven both by our vasanas, our freedom of will, and in accordance with destiny. Because in order for us to experience our destiny, certain actions we need to do. So at the same time, our body, speech, and mind are being driven both by those actions that we have to do in order to experience our destiny, and by our freedom of will. By default, we can say any action we do by mind, speech, and body is driven by our vasanas. Why? Because even supposing it's your destiny to today it's your destiny to eat a very tasty meal, and in order to eat that very tasty meal, you have to buy the ingredients, you have to cook it, and you have to pay proper attention when you're cooking so you don't burn it. So all those actions that you do in order to prepare and eat that tasty meal, you're doing them in accordance with your destiny. But that doesn't mean that your will is not involved, because not only is it your destiny to eat a tasty meal today, you have a liking to eat a tasty meal today. So in that case, your will and your destiny are going hand in hand. Even when you experience something that you are not destined to experience, still your will is involved there. You don't want to experience it, so you try to avoid it. But in spite of your trying to avoid it, your actions lead to that result. You may, for example, there's a Sufi story about a merchant was told by some genie or something that death was going to catch him at such and such a time. So he called his servant and told him to bring his fastest horse. And he quickly left that place, thinking if he can leave quickly, he can avoid death. And he was riding his horse very fast. And at a certain point, when the time for his death was destined, the horse tripped and he fell and he broke his neck. So and then death appeared before him and said, "See, you can't escape me." So sometimes the actions we do in order to avoid what we are destined to experience are the actions that lead to what we are destined to experience. So the fact that whatever we are to experience is predetermined doesn't at all contradict the fact that we have freedom of will. If we had no freedom of will, you can set fire to all the Vedas and Bibles and all scriptures, all the teachings of all gurus. You can put a bonfire, you can make a bonfire of them, because they're of no use. Because whatever you're destined to do, you'll be made to do. So Bhagavan never said that we don't have freedom of will. In English, we use this term, free will, which is a rather confusing term, because generally what people understand by free will is freedom to do what you want. Freedom to do what you want is not freedom of will, it's freedom of action. To act according to if we are free to act according to our will, that's freedom of action. So Bhagavan, when he spoke about this, he spoke about it much more precisely. He distinguished, he said we have freedom of will, which he called Ichcha Swatantra, and we have freedom of action. Our freedom of will is unlimited, because nobody can make you want or not want anything. No one can make you want what you don't want, or make you not want what you do want. So the will is entirely in our hands. There's no external constraint. The only limitation on our will is that we desire many things. Often our what we want is there's an internal conflict within our will. I want to be healthy, so I want to give up smoking. But at the same time, I don't want to give up smoking because I've been smoking all my life, and so like this. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm smoking, but I'm like this. There's so many things that we do, but we want to do them, but at the same time we don't want to do them because we know that doing it is not good for me, but at the same time we have a liking to do it. So because of the conflict within our will, it seems that we are not always able to it seems that, for example, we're now following the spiritual path. We want to attend to ourselves because we know if we attend to ourselves, that's a means to attain infinite happiness. But though we want to attend to ourselves, we also want to attend to so many other things. So there's that conflict, and that conflict between our liking to attend to ourselves and our liking to attend to other things, that conflict is what is called self-investigation. That is our trying to attend to ourselves rather than allowing ourselves to be swayed by other likings is the practice of self-investigation. Any spiritual practice implies freedom of will. Take surrender, for example. Surrender begins with trying to surrender our will to the will of God. If we had no freedom of will, how can we surrender our will? So we do have freedom of will, and so our freedom of will, there's no limit to our freedom of will, except there's no external limits on our freedom of will. The only limits on our freedom of will is the internal constraints because of the conflicts within our own will, because we want conflicting things. As far as freedom of action is concerned, our freedom of action is obviously limited. I may want to climb to the top of Mount Everest, but at my age, it's probably not possible. However much I may want to climb to the top of Mount Everest, if I were to try and climb, and I've anyway got lung problems, so if I were to try and climb, I'd collapse halfway and I wouldn't make it to the top. So though I may want to climb Mount Everest, I don't have the freedom to do so. I've got the freedom to try. I can, as soon as the pandemic is over, I can buy a plane ticket and go to Nepal and attempt to do it, but I don't have a, so obviously actions, there's a limit on our freedom of action. We do have freedom of action, but it's limited by so many constraints. So, I
just want to ask
three types. Okay, can I just finish? There are three possible types of freedom. There's the freedom to want what we want. That is, we've got full freedom to want whatever we want and not to want whatever we don't want. Freedom of action is limited. Freedom of achieving what we want to achieve is we have no such freedom. That is, I may want, maybe my destiny to undergo a certain, it may be my destiny to catch COVID and to die. I don't want to catch COVID and die. I can try and avoid it. I can take the vaccination. I can be carefully washing my hands and avoiding contacting other people. But if it's my destiny to die of that, I will die of it, however much I try to avoid it. So we've got freedom to want whatever we want. We've got limited freedom to try to achieve whatever we want. We have no freedom to achieve whatever we want. If we achieve what we want, it is because we were already destined to achieve that. So I hope that clarifies that freedom of will and predetermination are perfectly compatible in Bhagavan's teachings.
Michael, can I ask a question here about this self-abidance again?
Yes.
You made it sound like it's a very, very difficult process, and I'm not questioning that part. What my question has to do with is when you ask yourself, "Who am I?" Or when I do, anyhow, I go into a place of quietness, a place of silence, a place of stillness that sometimes is very short and sometimes it's not. And that in meditation, I just stay with the same thing. Whenever a thought comes up, I go into the self-inquiry, and in that, like so when I'm in silence, I try to stay in the silence. Are you saying that this is incorrect, that I should be doing something else? But then if I'm doing something else, I'm kind of like reacting to another thought process.
That is, you shouldn't be concerned about whether you're in a state of silence or whether thoughts are there. You should only be concerned about trying to attend to yourself. If you're attending to yourself, to the extent to which you're attending to yourself, your mind will thereby be quiet, because when you're attending to yourself, there's no room for other thoughts to rise. But in practice, when we are practicing self-investigation, the Vishaya Vasas will be constantly will be constantly feeling inclined to attend to other things. So we have to hold fast to self-attentiveness in order to avoid allowing ourselves to be swayed by those inclinations. Sorry, Marty, what I was saying, was it clear?
I think so. If I understand you correctly, it's not to try to remain in the silence, but to just be in that silence, and then as other thoughts arise, just follow the same process to go back into that silence.
That is our real nature. What we actually are is infinite silence. The silence we experience as ego is something that comes and goes. It's only a relative silence. Because it comes and goes, it's something other than ourselves. What we are trying to hold on to is what is constant. What is constant is only that fundamental awareness, I am. So we're trying to hold on to that which is constant. If we are holding on to that successfully, yes, there will be silence, but that silence is a byproduct. It's not our aim. Our aim is only to hold on to I am. Because otherwise, if we are just trying to be in a state of silence, that can lead to manolaya. Because that silence is something other than ourselves. To whom is that silence? Who is aware of that silence? This is a very deep and subtle practice that Bhagavan has taught us. But the clue is that our aim is just to be attentively self-aware. It doesn't matter whether there are thoughts or whether there's silence or whatever it is. Are we attending to ourselves or not? Are we attending to that basic awareness I am? Are we attending to that which is ever present? Because Bhagavan often compared the awareness I am to the screen on which the pictures appear. It doesn't matter whether pictures are appearing or not. We should be attending only to the screen. Let the pictures come and go. Doesn't matter. Our only aim should be to attend to the screen.
I guess I was looking at it like the silence is the permanent natural state, and that the only time it's disturbed, well, it's never disturbed, but it's covered by the thoughts. And as soon as the thoughts are eliminated, the silence is the natural result of that.
Yes, that's
you're saying that because I'm aware of the silence, it's not a true silence. That it's I need to go deeper than that.
You need to go deeper than that. That is the trouble. Is this is when Bhagavan, well, probably more than once, but they've been recorded when Bhagavan was asked how to practice this self-investigation. Bhagavan said, if the way were objective, it could be shown by another. But but this isn't an objective path, so it cannot be shown by another, by someone else. Each of us have to find the way into our own home. So Bhagavan's teaching are pointers, they're clues for us to follow. It's important to consider the clues very carefully, because now when you're talking, what you say is correct. That is there is a background of silence. I am, the nature of I am is silence. So that is a background of silence. To the extent that we are attending to I am, other things will subside and the silence alone will remain. But there's also another silence, which is an objective silence, which can be brought about by various practices. Even by pranayama, you can bring about a silence of mind. Mm-hmm. But the distinction lies in, are we being attentively self-aware or not? That is, that awareness I am is always there in the background. Are we holding on to that I am? Are we attending to that I am? Or are we allowing ourselves just to enjoy the silence? It's a very subtle distinction, and it's not a distinction that can be adequately expressed in words. But we need to make that distinction in our own practice. That's why Bhagavan says, whatever appears, to whom does it appear? That so we should be constantly trying to turn our to make sure our attention is holding on to, is held firmly on ourselves, rather than allowing it to be lulled into a sort of a state of quiescence. It's very difficult to say, because the distinction that I'm drawing is a distinction that is beyond thought, beyond words. So it's a distinction that we can find it only by practice.
So it's like once you're in your practice, once you're aware that you're aware of something, you need to question that awareness.
Yeah, it's not question. You need to, I mean, metaphorically, yes, question, in the sense that we have to turn our attention back to ourselves.
Yes, yes.
That is one clue Bhagavan sometimes gave. He said in Tamil, Unne vidamal iru. That means be without leaving yourself. So that holding on to ourselves is the key to it. Because otherwise there's a danger of slipping into manolaya. And Bhagavan always warned against manolaya. Always warned against just enjoying a quiescence of mind. The whole aim of self-investigation is to hold on to ourself. But ourself is not an object, so that's why it becomes very difficult to, I mean, the distinction cannot be drawn in words. It's only by, that is why Bhagavan called this Atma-vichara. Vichara means investigation. We can learn how to investigate ourselves only by investigating ourselves.
Michael, just to
yes
pick up on Marty's question.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing you say is that I know that silence we go into is pretty addictive. So I realize that probably that's not it. But what is from that silence? I mean, in that silence, you tend to forget who you are. You tend to forget time, space. So you're saying even then, that's not a glimpse of the reality, because you still have not turned 180 degrees to experience that reality, which is completely devoid of the ego. So even momentarily, the feeling that I don't exist was only from the mind. Is that what you're saying?
If we think that we in a state where we don't exist, that it clearly isn't a state of self-attentiveness. So there are many people who write to me and say, when I'm practicing self-attentiveness, I reach a point where there's no I. If what is happening there, I assume, is that they're getting into a state of quiescence, and they are overlooking this, their own existence there. They're just enjoying the quiescence. So that quiescence is an objective quiescence. So that is the whole aim. That is the guiding principle in self-investigation is that we are trying to hold on to ourselves. We're trying to hold on to that mere awareness, I am. More than that, words fail because we can't say it more. But there is a subtle distinction between holding on to I am and enjoying a mere quiescence of mind. That distinction we can find out only from our own practice.
Michael, you're making, I think, a very important point for some of us, perhaps, at least for me, you are.
Yes.
Almost a game-changing point to a certain degree.
Yes.
You're talking about the distinction between true quiescence and relative silence. That's the term.
Yeah. Yes.
Relative silence. And I feel you instructing us to treat relative silence when we attain it, just as we do thoughts.
Yes.
In whom does this silence occur?
Yes.
In other words, there's true quiescence, which is there forever, unchanging. Yes. And then in our Maya, there's this occasional periods of relative silence. And you're saying, treat it as you do thought. In whom does this silence occur? Yes. Allow the experience of silence to return us to even deeper self-inquiry.
Yes. But the relative silence, the silence that comes and goes, has a duration. The real silence, the supreme silence, is beyond time. And in order to reach that true silence, the only means is to hold on to I am. Doesn't matter, because the only thing in our experience that is permanent is that I am. Everything else comes and goes. Waking comes and goes, dream comes and goes, sleep comes and goes. All phenomena come and go. The agitation of the mind, the quietness of mind, all come and go. Everything comes and goes. Ego itself comes and goes. But there is something behind all these things that is ever permanent. We are that, Tattvamasi. And that is not something unknown. It's what we always know as I am. But the problem now is that fundamental awareness I am, in our experience, seems to be mixed up with awareness of other things. So we are trying to separate that fundamental awareness I am from all other things.
Thank you.
In other words, we are trying to attend only to the screen and not to whatever pictures, whether pictures appear on the screen or not, shouldn't matter to us, because our concern is only attending to the screen. So one day there may be a storm on the screen. The next day it may be a nice, peaceful, quiet, tranquil lake. But it's all pictures on the screen. The background is what is ever unchanging, what neither appears nor disappears. So shall I continue with the 6th paragraph, or does anyone have any other questions?
Please continue.
So, as I said, the last sentence we dealt with, where Bhagavan said, when one practices in this manner, for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. And practicing means turning our attention back to ourselves whenever it slips away from ourselves. Then in the next sentence, he says, when the subtle mind goes out through the doorway of the brain and sense organs, gross names and forms appear. That is, all phenomena are what Bhagavan refers to as gross names and forms of phenomena. So it's only when we allow our attention to go away from ourselves that names and forms of phenomena appear. And then in the next sentence, he says, that the mind remains in the heart, names and forms disappear. So all phenomena appear only when we allow our attention to go away from ourselves. When we hold our attention, when our attention remains in the heart, that's when we hold firmly to I am, all names and forms will disappear. And then he says in the next sentence, only to this state of keeping the mind in the heart without letting it go out does the name ahamukham or antamukham refer. Ahamukham, well, antamukham is a well-known term in Sanskrit. Anta means inward or within, and mukham means facing, so inward facing. The term ahamukham is a Tamil term. It means both inward facing and facing eye, because the Tamil word aham means what is within, or means heart, or home, or anything inside is aham. And aham is also a Sanskrit pronoun but means I. So in Tamil, Bhagavan often used this term ahamukham. It was one of his favorite terms because it means both facing inwards and facing I. So it was one of Bhagavan's favorite descriptions of the practice of self-attentiveness. Facing I means attending to ourselves. So attending to anything that appears and disappears is facing outwards, facing away from ourselves, bahyamukham. Facing inwards, facing ourselves, is only when we don't allow our attention to go to anything other than ourselves. And then in the next sentence he says, only to the state of letting the mind go out from the heart does the name bahyamukham refer. So bahyamukham means outward facing. So allowing our attention to go away from ourselves is bahyamukham. Holding our attention firmly on ourselves is antamukham or ahamukham. And then in the next sentence he says, in this way, when the mind remains firmly fixed in the heart, what is called I, namely ego, which is the root of all thoughts, will depart, and oneself, who always exists, alone will shine. That is our aim in the practice, as saying earlier, is to hold firmly to self-attentiveness. When we're holding firmly to self-attentiveness, that is what Bhagavan describes as the mind remaining in the heart. And if we persevere in this practice, eventually this what is called I, which is the root of all thoughts, in other words, ego, will depart. And what will then remain is what we actually are, oneself, who always exists, alone will shine. That is, the more we cling to I am, the more the ego, the false awareness, I am this person, will subside and eventually dissolve back into its source. In other words, the adjuncts will drop off, and what will remain is only I am. So ego is the adjunct mixed awareness. By clinging firmly to I am, which is the adjunct free awareness, the adjuncts drop off, and eventually only the adjunct free awareness will remain. That is the pure awareness I am. And then he says in the next sentence, only the place where the thought called I does not exist even a little is Swarupa. The thought called I means ego, and Swarupa means our real nature. So only and Bhagavan uses here the word place. Bhagavan often uses the word place in a metaphorical sense. We can take it, we can take it to mean here, we can take it to mean state. But there's a certain beauty in the way Bhagavan says it. Only the place where the I thought doesn't exist, even a little, is Swarupa. We can interpret it to mean only the state where where ego doesn't exist, even in the slightest extent, is our real nature. And then he says in the next sentence, Aduve monam enapadam. That alone is called mona. So the real silence is not the temporary quiescence of mind that comes and goes. The real silence is that state in which there's ego doesn't exist even in the slightest. where ego is so totally non-existent there. But it's not that ego once existed and now it has ceased to exist. Ego never existed. When we are aware of ourselves so clearly, or when we're so clearly aware of what we actually are, but it'll be clear that there never was any ego. That is our real nature. That is silence. And it is also what is called just being, Summa-Irupadu, as he says a little further on. And then he says in the next sentence, only to the state of just being in this way does the name Jnana Drishti refer. Jnana Drishti means awareness seeing or knowledge seeing. Jnana means knowledge or awareness. Drishti means seeing. So it's a state in which we see what we actually are, is the true meaning of that term, but it's often interpreted in a different sense, which Bhagavan deals with a little later. So only to the state of just being without rising as ego is the implication. That is what is called Jnana Drishti. And what does he mean by just being? Summa-Irupadu. He explains in the next sentence, what just being Summa-Irupadu is only making the mind dissolve, disappear or die in Atma-Swarupa, in our own real nature, in the real nature of ourself. The word he uses for dissolve is laika, but in this sense, he's not talking about the temporary dissolution, but the permanent dissolution. So in other words, destruction. So what Summa-Irupadu, that's the state of just being, what it is only that state in which the mind is dissolved completely in our own real nature. And then in the final sentence of this paragraph, he says, besides this, knowing the thoughts of others, knowing the three times, and knowing what is happening in distant places cannot be Jnana Drishti. That is, in colloquial terms, in the popular imagination, Jnana Drishti means having supernatural powers, like being able to read other people's thoughts, being able to know what happened in the past and what happens in the future and what's happening in distant places. All these are, and such powers, yogis can develop powers like these, and these are taken by ordinary people to be Jnana Drishti. Bhagavan said, this isn't Jnana Drishti. Jnana Drishti means only the total dissolution of the mind in its source, the permanent dissolution of the mind in its source. So this, what he says here about Summa-Irupadu, just being, this connects back to what I was saying earlier, but self-investigation is not a state, is not a doing, but a state of just being. Attending to anything other than ourselves is a doing, because it's the movement of our attention away from ourselves. And when our attention moves away, to the extent to which our attention moves away from ourselves, ego rises. To the extent to which our attention turns back and faces ourselves alone, ego subsides. And what remains then is just the state of just being. And the state where ego is completely eradicated, that is the state of the perfect state of just being. When we are practicing just being, it's only a partial state of being. We're not entirely just being, but to the extent to which we attend to I, we are thereby coming close to that state of just being. Because the more we attend to I, the more ego subsides. The more ego subsides, the more the ego is the doer of all actions. It's the root of all doing. So to the extent ego subsides, doing subsides along with it. I could go on to the next paragraph, but I think we've only got a few minutes left, so I think it's probably.
I think it is too, but I would like to make one little comment. The last couple of weeks, it's kind of like this question's been going on in the back of my head. It's like not so much am I doing this right or wrong? It's more like just continuing with the process. But in the back of my mind, there's been this thought of like, okay, Bhagavan, this is in your hands. You're going to, bring me in the direction you want me to go. And then here you are talking about all these specific things today. So I think it's...
Absolutely. That is, but if we are sincerely trying to follow this path, Bhagavan is ever shining. That is the I am that we are trying to attend to. That is the true form of Bhagavan. So he is ever in our heart and he is guiding us. That's why it's important to understand his teachings correctly, because our understanding will guide us to a certain extent, but the real guidance comes from within. The more we attend to I am, the more clarity will dawn in our mind, and the clearer the way will become. Mana, you had a question you wanted to ask. Do you want to ask that now?
Sure. So my question was, what is the difference between I, or I, as Ramana talks about it, and I am, as Nisargadatta talks about it?
Okay. I don't know a lot about Nisargadatta. I haven't really studied his teachings in any great detail, so I can't say much about him. I and I am are essentially one and the same. I is the pronoun that refers to ourself. I am, it means I exist. It is a statement of our existence. So our existence and ourself are one and the same. That is, we cannot distinguish ourselves from our existence. We cannot distinguish our existence from ourselves. That is, existence or being is our very nature. In some context, Bhagavan referred to I. In some context, he referred to I am. When he referred to I, in some contexts, it refers to ego. In other contexts, it refers to our real nature. That doesn't mean that there are two I's. There's only one I. But the one I, in its pure condition, is our real nature. That is, I without any adjuncts, as just I am, is our real nature. Whereas I mixed with adjuncts, as I am this or I am that, is ego. Whenever Bhagavan talked about I am, he was talking about our real nature. Because if in the sentence I am there means exist, I exist. So it is that is our existence is real, is what is real. In the sentence I am this or I am that, am there is not talking about existence, it's talking about identity. That is, when we say I am this, it is I identify with this. I take this to be myself. So am is there not a verb that means existence. It serves as what is in English grammar called copula. It's what links the subject and the what's it called, the subject complement. So when you say I am this, I is the subject, this is the subject complement. So there am is serving to identify I with this. Whereas in the when Bhagavan talks about I am without any not I am this or I am that, but just I am, he's talking about our existence. So whenever Bhagavan talks about I am, he's talking about the reality, what is our real nature, which is just the pure awareness I am. That is, our real nature is never aware of itself as I am this or I am that. It's aware of itself only as I am. Whereas ego is aware of itself as I am, but not just I am. It's aware of itself as I am this or I am that. So that is the distinction. It's not that there are two different I's. There's only one I. But when that one I is mixed with adjuncts, it's ego. When it's bereft of adjuncts, it's our real nature. The term that is translated in English as I, in Tamil it's aham, in Tamil it's Nāṉ Ār, in Sanskrit it's aham. But it doesn't actually mean I. Because in Tamil and Sanskrit, if you want to say I am this, you just say I this. Or if you want to say who am I, you say who I. Or I who. Nāṉ Ār means I who. The am is understood there. In many languages, like Tamil and Sanskrit, it's not necessary to use the verb, the copula. I think it's called the zero copula principle. It's there in many languages. It's understood. If you say I this, the am is understood there. So when Bhagavan says Nāṉ Ār in Tamil or aham in Sanskrit, it implies, though the words are just I, the implication is I am I. The context in which Bhagavan used that term I am I is that when ego, the false awareness, I am this, dies, our identity, instead of identifying ourselves with anything other than ourselves, that is this or that, is something other than ourselves. So that's a false identity. The real identity, I am only I'm nothing other than I. So the implication of that term, which is wrongly translated as in English as I am, as I hyphen I, is actually I am I, in the sense that I am only I'm nothing other than I. In other words, I am not anything other than myself. That is the significance of that term. So in Bhagavan's teachings, wherever you see Bhagavan talking about I am, he's referring to what is real. And within the ego is a mixture of that pure awareness I am and adjuncts. So when Bhagavan talks about I am, he's talking about the adjunct-free awareness. When he's talking about I am this or I am that, he's talking about the adjunct-bound awareness, the adjunct-mixed awareness. That is ego. Regarding Nisargadatta, as I say, I've not studied Nisargadatta in great depth. I've come across things that are quoted here and there. But one strange thing that I've read that Nisargadatta says in some places is that he talks about a state beyond I am, which in the sense in which Bhagavan uses the term I am, which is the logical sense, which is our existence, there cannot be any state beyond our existence, because according to Bhagavan, what actually exists is, as in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph, which is the paragraph I'll start from next time, Bhagavan says, Yathatamai Uḷḷadu Atma-vichara. That means what actually exists is only the nature of oneself, the real nature of oneself. So we alone are what actually exists. So I am refers to our existence. Since we alone are what actually exists, there cannot be anything beyond I am. When I pointed this out to people, people say, oh, no, but when the Nisargadatta talks about I am, he's talking about ego. But ego isn't I am. Ego, I am in its pure condition is our real nature. Ego is I am mixed with adjuncts. So, of course, Nisargadatta didn't speak English. He spoke only Marathi. So I don't know whether a fault lies in the translators or where, but there's many things about Nisargadatta's teachings are potentially quite confusing. But people superficially say, but conclude Nisargadatta's teachings are the same as Bhagavan's. But actually, there are many different interpretations. Advaita is understood in many different ways. And Nisargadatta's teachings, they are a form of Advaita, but it seems to me that in many respects, they seem to me to differ very very significantly from Bhagavan's teachings. For instance, I think in some places he distinguishes Brahman and Para-Brahman. Such a distinction would be meaningless in Bhagavan's teachings. That is Brahman, you are that, we are Brahman, there's nothing beyond Brahman. So Para-Brahman is just a synonym for Brahman. But I don't know, Nisargadatta belongs to some particular sampradaya. I've forgotten what the sampradaya. It's some sampradaya, but it's been there a long time in Maharashtra. But it seems to me it's some sort of a variation on Advaita, but it's not Advaita. Bhagavan has taught Advaita in an extremely refined way. And actually, Bhagavan's teachings are, that is, Bhagavan has taught Advaita in an extremely simple and refined manner, and in a very practical manner that was never. Bhagavan's teachings are extremely practical, and that is all the philosophy that Bhagavan teaches, it's all connected with the practice. That is the aim. But whatever philosophy Bhagavan taught us, Bhagavan isn't concerned with philosophy for the sake of philosophy. He's concerned with philosophy only for that. Bhagavan's philosophy is entirely practical. And it's also very simple. So if we understand Bhagavan's philosophy correctly, we will also understand the practice correctly. And only to the extent to which we understand the practice, we can understand practice only by practicing it. So only by practicing Bhagavan's teaching can we understand his philosophy. So it all ties together very neatly. Whereas when people quote to me things that Nisargadatta has said, it seems to me, I mean, I'm not saying Nisargadatta is wrong, but it's something, it's very, very different to the way Bhagavan expressed things. And it seems to me to be there seems to be a lot of confusion and contradiction in the way it's expressed, but it's a different tradition. So I'm not in a position to judge. And particularly since, as I say, Nisargadatta spoke only in Marathi, and other people have translated into English. So there could be errors in translation also. And also in recording, who knows? I don't know. I'm not in a position to say. So
No, that's okay. Thank you.
But as far as Bhagavan is concerned, when Bhagavan talks about I am, he means our real nature, what we actually are. I am is, Bhagavan often uses I am as a synonym for Satchit. Satchit means existence, awareness. Our awareness, what is our awareness of our own existence? I am. So whenever Bhagavan talks about I am, he's talking about Satchit.
Okay, very good. This has been quite an eye-opening experience for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's really a great teaching. Michael, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, I hope to a little extent I may have helped to clarify rather than confuse things, because this is
it's kind of like I can't wait to go inward and see what's going on and okay, how do I do this? How do I apply what Michael just said?
Because this is a very, as I say, it's a very deep and subtle practice that Bhagavan has taught us. It cannot be adequately explained, expressed in words. So we just have to take Bhagavan's words as pointers, and we have to try to apply those pointers in practice. To the extent that we apply them in practice, their meaning and significance will become clear to us. This is why I have been studying works like Who Am I? Nāṉ Ār and Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu and such works. I've been studying now for nearly 45 years, but I'm still learning from them. Not that I'm learning new, that is the deep significance of Bhagavan's words becomes clearer and clearer. The implications become clearer and clearer as time goes on. So it's not a matter of learning more information. It's about Bhagavan's words become clearer and clearer. The more we go deep in the practice, the more his words become clear to us. But even though they're clear to us, it's very difficult to try and, I mean, Bhagavan has said it as clearly as it can be said. So we can't, it's very difficult to express it adequately in words. Each of us we each have to do the investigation ourselves, and we will find the clarity as we go along.
Well, fortunately, we have somebody to talk to about it until we do find that clarity. So
yeah, it's useful. It's useful to talk about it because sometimes we can. I mean, it's useful for me also talking about this because when I struggle to try to explain it, and when I try to understand how other people find difficulty in understanding what seems so clear to me, this also helps to deepen my own understanding.
Thank you, Michael, for being here. It feels to be my destiny to be here with you once a month.
Well, yes, it is, certainly. You couldn't be seeing me and I couldn't be seeing you if it were not our destiny. You may not want to see me, but it's your destiny. Whether you want to see me or not, it's your destiny to see me now.
okay, everybody.
You're free either to want to see me or not want to see me. But you're not free to avoid seeing me if it's your destiny to see me.